Hi, everybody. Welcome back.
Hello.
You know what day it is. So, today we're going to be talking about HIV, and we actually have a special guest. But before we get into that, we wanted to bring out some facts. So, HIV is a virus that attacks the body's immune system, and the body's immune system is responsible for protecting against foreign invaders or viruses or any of that. And it's transmitted through body fluids, blood, semen, vaginal fluid, rectal fluid, and breast milk.
People cannot get HIV from kissing, hugging, or other types of non sexual physical contact. According to the CDC, an estimated of 1.2 million people in the United States have HIV at the end of 2021.
So, how does HIV/AIDS affect the African American population? According to the Office of Minority Health, although African Americans represent almost 13% of the U.S. population, they account for 42.1% of HIV infection cases in 2019. In 2020, African Americans were 7.8 times more likely to be diagnosed with HIV infection as compared to the white population. Although African American men are 6.0 times as likely to die from HIV infection as non-Hispanic white men.
And like we said, today we have a special dose. And so we have Larry today who will be talking about HIV and how it's been living with his diagnosis.
So let's get into this episode and welcome Larry.
Let's go.
Before we start, thank you so much, Larry, for joining us and coming on our podcast. We appreciate you
so much. Thank you so much for being on.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Before we get into everything, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Just something quick.
I hate that question.
I know it's the hardest question. What are you doing?
Yeah, after a certain amount of years on the planet, it gets a little complicated to condense it. But yeah, I'm a Nashville-born California transplant who's currently going back to school and is an artist and uh, is an open book, I guess, in a certain way. So, yeah, that's enough. We'll get there, I'm sure.
How long did you live in Nashville for?
Born and raised. I left 3 days after I graduated from high school, and I
Okay.
moved to San Diego to go to design school there at FIDM.
So you're really from California then?
Most of my adult life is West Coast.
Yeah.
It's like California, Portland, Oregon. It's just been up and down. But there's a whole lot of other stuff in between there and here. So yeah, I think I've made it around the world at this point.
That's awesome. That's Linda too. She's been everywhere. So
Yeah, I love some traveling.
Yeah, yeah. It was in my blood, so I guess I got to be honest. So.
Yeah.
So Larry, can you tell me about when you got diagnosed with HIV?
Sure. I was about 4 months after I got out of the Army. After discharge, I went back to Nashville, and it was a pretty textbook serial conversion. Sweats and feverish, and I knew what was happening to me.
Nice. So when you did get diagnosed, how did you feel? Like, how was that for you?
Horrifying. This was also, 98? So there was still a lot of fear around like whether you'd actually live.
Yeah.
Medications just started changing over from AZT to more humane approaches, but a lot of mythos around it, a lot of fear.
Nice.
That's understandable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you when you initially got diagnosed, did you tell anyone? Did you tell friends? Did you have anyone to lean on?
The telling and leaning are two different things.
I agree. I would agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, because I told my best friend from high school, the person that I was sweating on a couch when it was happening. Um, After I found out, I let her know, and then I talked to my dad. He's my best friend, so he was going to
Oh,
be the
Love
first
that.
My dad is
person.
my best friend too.
Oh yay! Oh cool! I love that. I don't hear it enough in the world.
yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, and I've walked life with it kind of close to my chest. Not so well. Socially, there's still a lot of fear and stigma, like
I
even today.
agree. Yeah.
There is.
Yes,
Yes.
I take care and I'm careful and how I approach, and even like in work situations where it's potential to be bleed or scratch or cut, I tend to like stay vigilant about like exposure, even living life with undetectable as for most of it. So
Speaking of like the stigma, because I know you mentioned, well, there is stigma still around it. How was your family and friends like supportive? Like, were they supportive? Did they kind of alienate you after learning about your diagnosis? Like, how did your basically your community support you?
well, let's see. We, the only person in my family that I've had the direct conversation with has been my dad.
Okay.
It hasn't been in conversation,
Mhm.
but it has. But I've also been living with this for wow, 98. That's definitely over 20 years. So yeah, so it just hasn't come up. This will probably be my outing in certain ways. So we'll see.
And how do you feel about that? Saying that?
Yeah. I was about to ask that.
Yeah.
Um, I do have an inkling of like not even concern. That's a little bit heavier than I want to say. But it does register that relationships could change.
Yeah.
But if that's the case, then that's what needs to happen, and let's get that done with because there's very little time in this life.
Right. And what ultimately made you decide between, coming, like being so open and the possibility of like, you know, having your relationships change? Like what made you decide to do this?
Well, I was asked. I didn't quite know what the subject matter would be, but
Right.
I just believe truth is truth, and regardless of how loud it's spoken, it's truth. So I've, I just if it affects relationships, then it needs to go ahead and affect it. So I'm not in the dark about it.
Ain't that the truth?
Mhm.
Just get it done. And
Yeah.
I'm not the personality to hold on to that and stifle self for the sake of holding on to a false relationship. That's all
Yeah.
under false
Right.
pretense.
Yeah.
But that's not something easily found. I think time and years help.
I agree. I think it takes like maturity, learning, and growth to be able to live life that way.
Within self, yeah. And
Yeah.
then also not really caring if some of the doors are closed in your world. Like when you're
Yeah.
younger, you want more doors open.
Yeah.
And then
It's
you can have
yeah.
that appeals
When
to you.
you're younger, it's more about like the quantity, like how many people, and not like the quality of friendship. And
Hmm.
as you mature
It
and get
comes.
older, it's like you realize that it's like
Yeah, and you figure
quantity.
out what that means to you. Because,
Yeah.
yeah, as a whole lot is about self definition. Even with my status,
Mhm.
it took years to get to a point where I could figure out my own path within it because it's just a different path. It's one
Right.
of a lot of health concern and
Yeah.
awareness for the best that you can hope for, but it can also be depressing and disempowering, and you want to give up.
With that being said, what has been the most difficult thing to navigate since finding out that your status?
It wouldn't have. It actually comes later in the process because I didn't expect to live past 30, And that's just in general, just that wasn't so uncommon even within my generation to expect. But once I passed that, I didn't know what to do with myself. And I started sliding into the darkness that is the depths of Inanna. I mean, like you just go to the bottom of who you are when you don't feel like you have a reason to live. And I have no children of my own. I've definitely been a part of the lives of many. But I also have a vaguely skewed view in that there, the only reason to live is because you want to. There's no real point and purpose to any of this in any of it. It's all distraction and it's all creation to keep us busy and occupied. We do this. We agree. And at some point in that depths, I realized that I do want to live. There are things that I want to do. And I had to find my path to crawl back out of that depth and that darkness. But I would say that was probably maybe 10, 15 years ago. And I'm still putting the crutches on because you never stop learning or growing unless you're dead.
Right.
I,
Right.
There's more work
you
to do.
mentioned that you didn't expect to live for more than 30 years. Was it because you were told that was going to be your life expectancy in a way, or was it just you thought that was going to be it?
It was more so enculturation. The I grew up at the tail end of the '70s through the '80s, and as far as like adulthood at 18 concept, the beginning of the '90s. So it through 3 decades, it kind of all mashed together. It's like, I'm not going to be alive much longer. 3 years old. It's just not going to happen.
And
The
look at you
bullets
now.
are
You're in
flying.
Colombia.
Be
Yeah.
poisoned. Yeah, it's just any number of things. Just nihilist. But so I was determined to live life fast forward. That I associate with
Yeah.
the diagnosis. I was
Uh,
like, give it all to me and give it all to me now.
yeah. I'm a little bad with math. So how old are you, if you don't mind sharing?
She's not lying. She's not the best.
Well, 48, soon to be 49.
Okay.
It's like I put my foot in it. And I was just
Yeah.
going. Um, I went to design school, then I went to the army, and then I went to Germany through the army, and I came through like 4 or 5 different East Coast places. And then I dropped at Fort Knox and decided I was going to go live in a commune for 6 months and flipped my reality from army to radical fairy, then traveled some more, then became a stilt walker, a fire performer, a store owner, costumer, I just everything and all the things.
Yeah.
Wow.
That sounds awesome.
Your resume is up here.
But I've definitely fallen a few times. One of those was coming back from Thailand. I picked up 3 different waterborne amoeba strains, and I was on antibiotics for a year.
Wow.
That's how I entered the health system in California, in Berkeley, because yeah, I ended up in the hospital after the last stitch of a prom dress I was commissioned to do, and fell, and was in the hospital for a week. I literally dropped. Felt like a Cinderella story or something in reverse.
Wow. Wow.
But yeah, I rambled. I'm sorry.
No, 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 no. I'm happy to see that you're doing better
Yeah.
because,
Yeah, man.
yeah,
That was like 2005. Yeah,
wow,
2004. 2004.
around that time.
Yeah.
Were there any misconceptions that you had before getting diagnosed with HIV?
Well, again, this is where I step out of the norm because my first job was as a teen pregnancy prevention panelist in 8th grade. I also worked as a teen crisis hotline operator until I think it was like junior in high school. So I knew what was real and what was fake.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. in saying that, in saying that, what the thought that comes to mind is I should have known better. And I'm sure at some point during that initial like diagnosis that ran through my head plenty because I beat myself up plenty. But yeah, that was my reality. So I didn't have too many far off notions.
Currently, do you, because I know you said you like beat yourself up, do you currently still have trouble with that, or like beating yourself up, or are you in a different place?
I don't think about it much. The biggest challenge for me with finding out I was positive and even living life that way was that my life shifted from being life to revolving around pills. Because at that point, it was at least 3 times a day that I was taking pills. And if you missed something, you just had to start a whole new regimen. I mean, it became your life.
Wow.
And that I was resentful for, and in that I may have kicked myself, but I don't have time. My challenge personally is more rumination. Keep rechewing things that I experience, and it's just a coping mechanism, and it's a reflex thing. But I think it stems as a replacement for kicking myself.
Yeah.
Like I'll ruminate over all of the negative experiences I had, or as a way of punishing self for putting myself in this position.
Is there anything that you've learned since your diagnosis?
Oh goodness, so many things. It's hard to even just pick one thing.
Oh,
I
so you
mean,
can tell us all of them.
well, eating is definitely one of them. Like I was a nutritional specialist in the army, so I like nutrition, eating healthy. Yeah, that was something. But using like food as medicine and preemptive and doing preemptive things like the apple cider vinegar with a little bit of honey and a little bit of salt and cayenne pepper in the morning and in the evening. Just working with diet to not need to go to the doctor and do all that prep, the pre work. That's it's a hobby. It's a meditation now. It's just changing the lens on it from just being creative.
I had another question, but it slipped, so I'm gonna have to think about it. But
So my question is, I know you said that 3 times a day you'll have to take pills. Are you?
Not anymore,
How
but
is your
yeah.
like pill regimen at the moment? Like, how do you take pills often, or is it
And
like
how
you?
many pills were you taking prior, and then versus now?
Yeah.
How many? Well, now it's just one,
Yeah.
which is good because
Yeah.
that was a challenge.
Hmm.
And with it being fewer pills, I've been far more vigilant. It's not as discouraging. Right now, I'm caught in the cracks of the health system. I was my insurance lapsed and I didn't know at the counter to get my refills.
Hmm.
So that created almost a month of break
Wow.
in the cycle. And the insurance was taken care of, that day or 2 days. And I still had to wait till I get back because I was leaving and it wouldn't start till the beginning of February. There are people who have extra pills. That office is moving, so that I wasn't getting in. I was calling. Nobody was contacting me. It's just a law of numbers. Everybody goes through the crack at some point in the
yeah,
machinery because it's so
yeah.
Right.
complicated. All of these moving parts. But yeah, yeah, it'll be fine when I get back. That's if that regimen still works.
Oh, so it's a possibility that you will have to switch over to something else now.
Exactly, because of the
Okay.
time lapse and the efficacy of the pills reduce the longer you're off of them.
Wow, that's very difficult.
Yeah.
And is no one to blame?
No.
There's no one person to blame, or even one department. I mean, it's just. There's no net.
Yes and no. I feel like there should be a system in place though for like when things like this happen, because same thing actually happened to me recently. My insurance lapsed, and I take medication as well, and if I don't take it I start to feel physically sick. So um something like that were to happen, there should be something in place where you should be able to have like a backup system of medication or
Even
something.
just someone to talk to about it.
Right.
Yeah,
Because we're so far separated that all I get is a voice call with
Automatic.
the looping messages, and then maybe I get an operator who's not associated with the clinic that I go to, doesn't know anybody, and could care less who I am.
right.
Yeah, the careless. Yeah, pretty
Yep.
much.
That's super difficult. Well, I'm sorry you're dealing with that.
Yeah, luckily it's handled, and luckily I'm not in such a desperate situation medically
Yeah,
that it's the end of the world or anything dramatic. But there are plenty that are,
yeah,
and just that one little slip, and your world has changed.
yeah,
Wow. Oh, yeah. When you put it like that, it's. I feel like there's a lot that just the everyday person don't understand or don't understand like the struggle because I was like putting a thought behind is like wow there are moments where like what you're currently in or had to deal with it was like you didn't have like you couldn't get the medication that you needed and everything now is a fear that you may have to I don't know if there's a fear but just hoping like that the regimen that you're currently on that it's still working.
Yeah, and that I don't have to go to something worse. Like
Yeah.
I could totally revert back to having to take 2 or 3 pills a day,
y-
which I do not want to do. But there are other things that are newer that I could possibly go to as well. So it's still hope, and I know enough of the lay of the land that I know that there is hope,
yeah,
which again different. Because it took me years to finally register what any of those numbers were. Like
hmm
your whatever was good. Okay. Like you could be talking a foreign language as far as I'm concerned, and I'm not gonna grasp this.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was resistant. I just couldn't bear because every time you do, you have to acknowledge the fact that it's real.
Mhm.
So getting invested and active in your own healthcare is so important.
it is, and that's actually something too that that's another thing we also like to talk about too is like just increasing health literacy as well,
Mhm.
because we are at least as working someone who's working in healthcare or training to work in healthcare, I've noticed that you have to be your own advocate. And
Yep.
so if you don't know about your care, you can't advocate for yourself as effectively. So it's very important.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate that people those that don't have like health literacy or just understand what is supposed to be happening like with their provider and them like they don't know how to advocate or what's expected from their healthcare provider like I'm always arguing with family members saying like no you have to advocate for yourself I know like being in school we're taught like oh we have to advocate for our patients but
But
that it's yeah. And sometimes the provider has hundreds of patients and that you can be that one that slips through the crack and they're not gonna call on you like to check
some,
in.
and then sometimes there are situations and times where I've run across plenty of people who are supposed to be providing me care who weren't doing that. They were,
Yeah.
they were following the dots and connecting the dots and coloring in the circles, but they weren't doing for what I needed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm not the personality that's going to sit and take it. But there are plenty of people who still think just because you got that job, you are Lord. That is not the truth. You are a human being at the end of the day, and people make mistakes. Like certain
Agreed.
down, it's
Yeah.
just and I'm not the one. But there are plenty of people who do need that help, and it's just blinding. Like as I'm saying it, I'm just seeing all the different types of faces that have run across in my life.
Were you always like that, Larry, or did it take time for you to be able to advocate for yourself?
Bits and pieces of both. because I was definitely a church child. There was a lot, you respect everything. You respect your elders who do the thing. You
Yeah.
step back, and put
Mhm.
yourself back a little bit. But there was a point where it's just no more. But I've always had that limit, though.
Yeah.
I'll be there. I'll be there. I'll be there. And then bye. You know, but then instead of saying goodbye, it's just like, this is what's going on. I have the language in order to speak to you about it. And either you're going to listen to me or else I'm going to do what I know is another option.
With that being said, with that being said, Larry, can you discuss any biases that you've experienced in healthcare related to your status?
Not so much my status, strangely enough.
Okay.
Um, and I've had healthcare from California, Texas, Louisiana, Tennessee, Illinois,
Wow.
Oregon, and no, not New Mexico, Kentucky. But
Wow.
all of the different flavors and
All around the
textures,
world.
not so
Yeah.
much. It's just I get more from class presumption.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
I'm not
Social
surprised.
sensitivity is a new sort of term, but it's been lacking for a long time. People presume a whole lot just by looking at me before, even after they hear me speak, they still are stuck and they cannot grasp that I'm not a 2-year-old and that I know how to read.
Oh my gosh.
They get surprised. Like, what?
And I've learned entirely too much in my life. I'm That's probably been the biggest irritant.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just not being treated like an adult just because I have something going on. And it could be the most well meaning human beings, but it still comes off wrong.
Mhm.
Mhm.
It's cultural sensitivity is something that everybody should be doing more of.
I
And
agree.
by asking questions, just seeing who you are talking to.
I agree.
I know.
No, you're so right.
I get passionate about little things. I can't help
No,
it.
you're
Love
very
it.
right.
I'm a
You're
goof.
so right.
I love it. So I guess my follow-up question to that is I hear that you've traveled a lot and you've been to many states where you received health care. So what state, even country, have you received the best health care and the worst?
Well, I'm going to limit it to the country because Germany is the only other place that I had health care, and that was Army. So it might as well be the same thing. Different things in different places. Like as far as like day-to-day doctor's visits and things like that, New Orleans by far. But anything in the hospital, oh please. Like there's no way in the world. I'm trying my best not to cuss right now.
Sorry.
Me and
You,
you both.
sorry, you said New Orleans by far was the
Do not go to the hospital in New
Oh,
Orleans.
the worst. Okay.
Okay, good to know.
When I go to Mardi Gras, people
You
partying,
got to be
I
careful.
need
Don't
to know,
slip on
don't get sick.
nothing in that muck on the streets and end up in the hospital. I'm not even going to say the name of the place because that's rude too.
yeah.
But anyway, but daily care was good because I had a nurse practitioner that listened to me that I ran into at the grocery store. It was good. It was people. And then once it stepped past, but let me step away from that. Nashville's good too. Vanderbilt is thorough and quick. Uh, but the day-to-day visits is complicated. I mean, getting things covered is complicated and it's hard to get to places. It's spread out and it feels like you're going to a stranger every time you go, even if you're not.
That's hard.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
Texas, that was in the 90s. But so I give them room to be different. But as far as social help with healthcare, please, that's not even on the board. Like I remember I had to go to some random office in the middle of nowhere, had to walk like a mile from the bus stop because I wasn't sure where it was. It's pitiful. Now, mind you, again, it's the 90s and Austin is definitely got a lot more money now.
Yeah, it's changed.
Yeah, so maybe. And then, the rest are fair to middling. It's like Oregon it has a lot of programs. but depending on which city you live in, depends on what kind of health care you get. From Grants Pass, you're not going to get all that much. You're going to have to drive. In Eugene, which is attempts at being open minded, there's a lot of culture clash there that
Mm.
makes access hard. And there's a
Yeah.
lot of people who need it. And in Portland, it's Portland, so there are ways around the inadequacies. And other than that, yeah, that's about it. Everything else is, what it is.
Well,
What are um I know you said that you didn't have really misconceptions because you had you worked in places where you were able to educate yourself, but what are some misconceptions that the people around you or people that you've been around have had that you noticed?
I can't recall a clear situation where that's even been a subject or a topic. So I guess not forgetting that it's still around,
Hmm.
because the absence of interaction about it hasn't been prevalent in my memory. It's
Right.
something that easily, like somebody may have died or somebody knows somebody that did. That's a separate set of stories, but it's not a dialogue.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, because and they have like things like prep and all these other things, and
They do. They do.
there's still no cure, and
Yes.
and it's easy to kind of to forget that.
Yeah. So it's very important to still be safe.
Yeah,
yeah.
What is something that you will tell someone who has been recently diagnosed with HIV?
that one first. That there is no, and don't just go willy nilly. But life's not over. Um, I know that's vaguely cliche, but I don't really think it's something that's even, in most cases, needed, because I feel like generations younger than myself have that built in somewhere. Maybe out of example, because there are plenty of people that live with it,
Hmm.
and it doesn't make you a bad person. It actually gives you an opportunity to be a better one if you want.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and then I know earlier you mentioned that when you kind of around the time when you first found out about your diagnosis, you were beating yourself up about it. Mentally, like overall during the whole process from when you first got diagnosed until now, and like what was your mood like mentally, and regret, anger, sadness, and then how did you get go from there to like where you are now, if that makes sense? I know I kind of bunch that all together.
Um, it's just life.
Hmm.
Uh, I can't say that any of the phases that I went through in the process, shame and distraction, trying to like avoid reality and all that stuff. It's nothing different than any other form of life's cycle, that,
Right.
but I think there was a bit of compression, a bit of pressure, a bit of push, because somewhere in my head there was a clock ticking.
Hmm.
With your immune system compromised, anything can take you down. Like I was afraid to have a cat for a long time, just because I was afraid to deal with the cat poop.
Wow.
Um,
Yeah.
It's yeah, it's strict. Like you, it's so I remember even volunteering at the hospital, even well in school they teach us even when you're admitted, you can't even have standing water left out on the bedside. Literally, the patient has to drink it, and you have to take it away. It's yeah.
Things grow quickly. Like I was
Mhm.
afraid of Hawaii when I went there the first time, because all it takes is a cut and you got staph. I mean, everything grows there.
Right.
And I was worried about going to Australia because I didn't know if they'd let me in because of my pills.
Oh,
Um,
wow, yeah.
it's just little things like that,
Hmm.
So
but they cause you to grow up or change your frame to the world a little bit.
So when did you stop living in fear, in a sense? Because you've traveled, like right now, you're in Colombia.
Well, I'm bold, but I'm not completely without fear.
Oh,
Fear thing, that's life. You better be afraid to some extent because anything in life can get you. But
yeah.
but I don't let it rule my life.
Hmm.
Like it took me a good week to take some of my armor off, even being here.
Okay.
Like
oh,
I yo hablo un poco. I don't speak so I gotta wear something, just stay away until I'm
yeah,
Mhm.
settled, so I feel safe. And yeah, it still pops in. It's just it has a place. It can't palsy you. Like if you let fear like pause you, all sorts of things can go wrong.
yeah.
Staying present. Yeah, that again, that takes time in life and figuring out what the key is for because it's different for each person.
What would you attribute um being the biggest influence in you having that change in mindset?
Biggest influence in having a change of mindset.
Like, did you just wake up one day and were you like, I'm tired of being like that, living my life like this? Or was there like an interaction with someone? Or like, what influenced you to have that change in mindset?
I can't say that there's any one thing because I think it has always been there for me. It's like I said, 3 days after I graduated, I went to another state that I had never been to before
Hmm.
to start in a school that I think I had a spot in. It's like to a certain degree, I've always jumped, but I think fear ends when you feel like when you're completely in yourself, and there's no map to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because ultimately your home is wherever you stand.
Yes, it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
So there is nothing to be afraid of. Nothing more than normal. You
Right.
know, just be about yourself. But I don't know. There's not one particular road mark. It's just as I get older, I care less.
I understand.
I
I feel that. I know I'm not old per se, but I
Yeah,
think as I've gotten older,
Just
I
kidding.
bet, I bet plenty of people will still call me a child, and that's fine. But it's a certain point. It's
for
just
me, because this,
care.
but I guess for me, like as I'm getting older, I'm starting to have that mindset as well. Like, you know what? Who cares? You know what?
Yeah, not
It is
everything's
what it
yours.
is.
Exactly. It is
What
what
it
it is.
is. Give me mine. Let me have that, and that's
Yeah.
good. You
Yeah.
know.
Mhm.
Yeah. I I want to circle back around just like with communication and big, because I know you said the first one of the first persons you told or had that conversation with, and maybe like the only not the only person that knows, but you had that conversation with your dad. How was that initial conversation? Was it challenging to bring it up to your father? Um, just to like give other listeners who may be in this like a similar situation of how they can approach talking to a family member.
Okay. Well, uh, I took him to a lookout over Nashville, and it was a place that was special to me, and I told him there because I needed a neutral place that didn't need to be inside any house. It needed to be outside. I drove, and I was crying, because I'm an only son. I'm an only child, and I have my dad's my hero. He was second only to Wonder Woman. And
We
that
put him
ended
second.
kind
I
of
was kidding. Let me call your dad right now. I was
But it's just I felt like I was letting him down. But all of those things are projections that I put on everything else.
kidding.
It wasn't anything that he put out on me, and that most of my shame and my guilt come from me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And later on in life, I picked up the saying that compliments and complaints are both the same. They're somebody else's opinion, and that rang true to me. And it fits there too.
It does. Wow. That's actually something that I'm trying to learn over time is just that, like you said, we put so much in our own heads and we just assume that's what the other person is thinking, but the other person is not even that's not having even crossed their mind.
No.
Driving yourself crazy on things that you think the other person is saying. They're not even thinking about you.
And then even with that, like you even stop living life
Hmm.
Yeah.
because you saw it in your head, and it's just
Yes.
not. It's not okay. But
Again, it's self impediment. I mean, it's like you spend too much time in here, you're not dealing with this.
mhm,
Right.
And there's a whole lot of things that can go wrong.
right.
But
That's something I'm going to keep carrying, is what you guys are saying is like a lot of times it's just in our head and we stop ourselves from being our or realizing our true potential because we're the one that's our in our head, and we not paying attention to the real life and what we could be doing. We're just holding ourselves back.
and reaching your
So,
full potential is actually a big fear for a lot of people. It's like
yeah.
we tend to get in our way.
That's
The
me right now.
world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Larry, you go to therapy?
Uh, Not right now, but I have had
Have you
plenty of times in
been?
my life.
It sounds like because like everything you're saying is some a lot of things that I've picked up in therapy as well, and
Oh,
we're all in
cool.
therapy. Well, I'm not, but
Yeah, it's a
but
good thing to do.
yeah.
It is.
It's always good to have somebody to talk to that isn't necessarily directly connected to your life. Just be able to speak into the void, but the void has a pulse.
Wow.
Larry, you're so poetic.
You really.
Thank you. That's how the words fit in my brain. Wired funny.
No, you did. You're doing great.
No, you're
And definitely dropped a lot of gems in this episode.
Oh,
Um, I
cool.
guess no, you have. Yes. So thank you so much for coming on. Because I learned a lot as well. But before we close off the episode, is there another gem that you want to drop, or just would that you would want others to know? I'm not putting pressure on you.
I know. No pressure to drop that last beautiful, beautiful gem.
I'm afraid my sound bites previous are going to have to do.
Sounds good.
What about you guys? Got any more
Uh,
questions?
well, I just want to thank you for being here and being so vulnerable. To be honest, like I struggle myself to be on here and just be on, just talking to the world, but I know that the things that you've said are going to resonate with somebody and it's going to help somebody in their lives. So
Thank
thank
you
you
so
for being
much.
here.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
experiencing it, I'm noticing all sorts of like body language and things that I've been expressing that I need to look at. So thank y'all, because
Oh,
it's a process, and we
yeah.
constantly have to learn.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you're aware of yourself and like your body language and everything. And again, thank you so much for being vulnerable and coming on this podcast. I don't know how uncomfortable it was for you, but we appreciate it.
We
Thank you.
appreciate
It's very
you dropping
cathartic.
some knowledge and stuff that people probably don't talk about, and
Yeah.
it should be talked about. So thank you so much. Thank you for giving us your time, even though there's a big time. Well, it's 3 hours difference, but still. But yeah, we appreciate you, and hopefully we have even a future episode for
Yeah,
something else.
Sure. And I'd be willing. And thank you guys for pushing the envelope forward. At first, I wasn't sure how I could add to the conversation, but you've definitely made me feel like I had something to give. So I appreciate it.
Oh,
I did a lot. Thank you.
thank you and enjoy Colombia.
Thanks for listening to this episode of PG3 with your hosts Linda, Jasmine, and Catherine. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe at a potent dose of 3 so that you never miss an episode and your weekly dose.